A core memory of mine which will forever be stuck in my brain comes from a dark, cold December evening in the winter of 2010. 11-year-old me was kicking my legs as I circled the items in the Argos catalogue, which I quite frankly was not getting in the weeks to come on Christmas Day. And whilst I sat doing that in the same room as my parents, a 27-year-old decorator from Little Maplestead, Braintree would basically be dry humping Rihanna on the screen. So that'll be a core memory for many of you, as almost 20 million people tuned in to not only watch this, but to watch Matt Cardle win the 2010 season of X Factor and the birth of One Direction. And they also watched a certain teenage child explain to Matt Cardle, think about how much kitty you are going to get after this. I am, of course, talking about X Factor, the biggest vessel of reality TV that Britain has ever had to offer. The show is a talent show which discovered up-and-coming singers, groups, who all battled it out in a public vote in the chance to win a £1 million record contract. And the show delivered. Contestants from the show have achieved 42 number ones and have sold around 30 million singles and over 18 million albums. Not only did the show produce some of the most recognizable faces of the music industry to this date, it also provided us with some of the most recognizable memes to this date.
No way.
Everyone knew about this show. Hundreds of thousands applied a year. And that final I just spoke about was the most watched television show of the 2010s. The show became so big that these people were launched into overnight fame, spawning 56 different versions internationally. It is safe to say it is one of the biggest things to come out of UK television. Yet as years went by, the numbers dwindled. And in 2018, we saw the last version of X Factor as we knew it. The show was tried to revamp at the end of 2019 with a celebrity spin-off and a band spin-off. But eventually, after those attempts, it was quietly announced that the X Factor would not be coming back to our screens anytime soon. So how did we fall from number one singles worldwide, the most watched show of the 2010s, to a cancelled show that no one cared about? Well, we're gonna look at it. We're about to find out why. This is the rise and fall of X Factor.
You know what's solid? That Donnie.
Maybe you didn't need to change the gender referencing.
Lauren Jack. Very, very young.
Lucy.
Cheryl Cole has collapsed.
Absurd, all the fag ash breath.
I'm ready.
Rachel Adedeji.
Oh my gosh.
What is she singing?
Thank you.
I just want to do a little bit of disclaimer, a wee bit of housekeeping if you wouldn't mind. I'm so sorry about the lack of uploads. I just first of all want to say thank you so much and for the love and the appreciation and the support on my Love Island video. I put my whole lewysy into it. So I'm excited to bring you this X Factor one today. I also want to apologize for the delay. I actually originally intended for this video to be up a month ago. September was the world's worst month. Then I got really ill. Yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to sit here and explain, but do not worry. I already have another one in the works after this one. And it may be involving a certain UK reality TV show that has just been rebooted. But again, I want to say thank you so much. And point number two, a lot of this video will be containing some things which I need to heavily emphasize are alleged. Everything that I'm speaking about today has come from my research online or drawing my own conclusions from things which I've seen on the X Factor episodes themselves. But as I say, a lot of this is alleged. And without further ado, let's take it back to 2001, where the story begins.
Kentwood, Louisiana, here's 10-year-old Britney Spears.
The idea of televised talent shows has been a thing since the 1940s. And before X Factor even began, it produced some of the biggest stars to this day. Beyonce, Justin Timberlake, Christina Aguilera have all come from talent shows. However, there was a certain show in the UK in the year 2000 which was born. Big Brother. Big Brother's premise was basically a bunch of civilian people would move into a house and they would just have to live there in order to win money. These people, they could have been working at your local Superdrug on the till asking you if you want to sign up for a loyalty card. Spoiler alert, I don't. You ask me this every time, I'm just here to get some gum. Yet the nation was tuned in and invested in these people's lives. And they were the first sort of people who became famous for doing nothing. TV critic Scott Bryan says, this idea was that not only could you become famous, but also you could choose who the famous person is. I think now we kind of take that for granted, but at the time it still felt quite revolutionary. Us as public were not only seeing people like us on the television, but you could also decide their fate. And in 2001, a show called Pop Stars was created. Now in the first season, it was basically just sort of a documentary, and these industry experts were eliminating people as they went along and sort of got to watch the process of a band being created. And two men named Simon saw an opportunity. Simon Cowell and Simon Fuller saw the lucrativeness. Is lucrativeness even the word? You know what I mean if it's not. And a gate open wide. And they went to ITV to pitch a show called Pop Idol. The aim of the show was to decide the best new young pop singer or pop idol in the UK based on the viewers' votes. It was taking the essence of Big Brother and these being everyday normal people and the idea that the public got to decide their fate, and the essence of pop stars where you got to watch these singers be eliminated every week until you got a final winning product and merging them together. Now, Pop Idol is the same as American Idol, it's the same as all those other idols, and pretty much the same as X Factor, so I'm not going to go into explaining the show, but yada yada, yeah, everyday people come on the show, they sing for the judges, they go through the public vote until they get a winner at the final. And it is one of the UK's top earning TV formats. So much so that the final of the first series of Pop Idol was the highest ever one night vote for a show in TV history, making it one of ITV's most profitable shows. This was revolutionary. At this time, there was fewer channels, there was no social media. It was the destination for Saturday night entertainment to tune into the show and watch these people get eliminated every week. The nation was hooked on this prospect of instant stardom. It was an immediate success with 12 million viewers tuning into the first season, and it was just as horrific as X Factor, with the MPs claiming that the show needs to calm down for the second season because it was too much. Season 2 finished with the winner being Michelle McManus, who is a fantastic singer. However, Cowell didn't really deem her as someone who's going to be a star, someone who's going to sell him records for years and years to come. And while the show was extremely high earning while it's on, Simon Cowell was like, I can make money off these people with years to come after. And the artists were successful straight off the bat. The top 3 of the season 1 all gained #1 singles in the UK, but Simon wasn't happy with the image of these people. And prior to Pop Idol, Simon was pretty unknown and irrelevant. He was a music exec. But off the back of Pop Idol, Simon had this huge new public image. And so he pitched a brand new show to ITV called X Factor, in which he would be the executive producer on. And ITV wanted it. Because as I said, Simon was this huge public figure now. And he was basically like, I don't want to do Pop Idol anymore because I want control over all these people. I want to be the person who are calling the shots. And after a quick legal dispute with Simon Fuller, it was settled that Pop Idol would be no more and X Factor would be taking its Saturday night slot on ITV. Prior to Series 1 starting, ads started running in the newspaper, and they were trying to differentiate themselves from Pop Idol to make sure people knew that this was a new show. They were encouraging soloists to come, but unlike Pop Idol, they were also asking for groups, asking for people who played instruments, and even people who sang their own original songs. And the winner of the show would receive a $1 million recording contract with Psycho, Simon Cowell's music label. If you go back and watch Series 1, while it is very dated, there are some questionable haircuts and outfits that the Y2K Depop girlies would be salivating over. It is, in its premise, the same show as it was when it died in 2018. Thousands and thousands of hopefuls would turn up to audition. Wouldn't be the first time that they're actual auditioning, but we'll be getting onto that. Your judges would say yes or no, sending them through to boot camp before they would eventually go to the live shows. And one by one, each week, acts would be eliminated due to a public vote until we are left with one winner. Chosen by you at home! Isn't that so exciting? Now, the show was controversial from the get-go, but that was as expected because, as I said, it mirrored Pop Idol, which was also pretty controversial. But when you go back and look, girl, oh my god. I found this one clip of a contestant named Samantha who got through to the boot camp round, but only on the premise that she went on a diet. They said that she was too big to be a pop star, but she had the voice. And they were gonna let her through, but next time they see her, she better have lost some weight.
Sound nice, but look like a shop girl.
I know what you're saying, Ned.
What am I saying?
That I'm overweight,
You
basically.
are. You really are.
I'm working on it.
Louis.
I'm going to say no. Because I think it's Mission Impossible, so...
You know, I'm going to say yes for the simple reason I'd like to see what this girl is willing to do.
This is go on a diet, and I'll see you at the next round.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Can you tell this is a product of the early 2000s? Judges on this show were like no other. I haven't even told you about the judges yet. We, of course, have the nasty man himself, the big boss, Simon Cowell, who is the respected judge. He's the one who knows who he's talking about. We have TV personality and music manager Sharon Osbourne, wife of the famous rock star Ozzy Osbourne. Sharon was the no-nonsense woman who had a little bit of a soft spot in her heart. You know, she could see the vulnerability of the contestants. And finally, we had the Irish music manager, Louis Walsh, who was responsible for the likes of Boyzone and Westlife. Louis was sort of the punching bag, the laughing stock judge. Despite some controversy along the way, including Sharon's infamous rant to the eventual winner, Steve Brookstein.
And Mr. Should I sell my Volkswagen? Should I keep it? Believe me, all that BS that he gives out every week is full of crap, and he's an average singer.
The show was a success. The show climbed from 5 million viewers to the first audition episode to 9.96 just shy of 10 million for the final episode. And the acts were hits themselves too. As I said, the winner Steve Brookstein, his single Against All Odds went to #1 as well as his album. And the runners-up, which was a boy band called G4, had success too with a #1 cover of Bohemian Rhapsody. All in all, ratings were a success, the judges were a success, format was a success, and the contestants were a success. So it was a no-brainer that ITV commissioned a second season. And this time it was going to be bigger and better. A longer season, more acts through to the live shows. We would even be flying down to the destination of the judges' houses. Those weren't their fucking houses, by the way. They were villas on Airbnb.com. I used to get so gagged and gassed that these people were in the Nicole Scherzinger's French Villa Riviera. Turns out it was a Thomas Cook villa. And they didn't even sleep there. They slept in a hotel. The season 2 began. We got the bad auditions. We had the good audition. And we saw Molly King from the Saturday's acclaimed fame for the very first time, ladies and gentlemen. That is history. As I said, they were following along the same format as season 1, but this time bigger. And not only in the sense of the structure of the show, but also the behind-the-scenes controversy and drama. The first, and still to this day, only time in X Factor history, Simon sent his own act home, caused a ruckus, and the judges were fighting more than ever. So much so that Louis Walsh actually quit the show because of claims of bullying. Sharon threw water over Louis after he gave some negative feedback to her contestant, in which he responded saying,
Louis!
Are you taking all these drugs?
That kind of sounds like Jane Connery's Big Brother iconic, "Are you on drugs?"
Are you on drugs? Are you fucking on drugs?
And moments like this were definitely upped from the previous season into this sort of soap opera surrealism. It was gaining them the tabloid controversy that Cowell wanted, because more tabloid press means that more viewers are going to tune in, which means that more ka-ching into Simon Cowell's high-waisted trouser pocket. But the controversies were working. The show grew 1.5 million in viewers, and the cultural phenomenon of the X Factor was spreading fast. We even got the birth of Chico Time in this series.
It's Chico time.
There was also a attempted celebrity X Factor season after this, which featured Gillian McKeith singing "I Just Want to Make Love to You." And that was quickly axed after one season, with Simon Cowell promising that it would never happen again. Another random fact that I discovered when looking into series 3 is this. Unlike the previous 2 series, Kate's armpit wasn't exposed when she was announcing the winner in the final. This is due to her wearing a long-sleeved dress. There are some freaky people on the internet. Series 3 would actually see less success than Series 2, no thanks to Gillian McKeith, probably. And it was down 500,000 viewers. And though the series was commercially less successful, everything was about to change with the X Factor thanks to a certain superstar named Leona Lewis. Show as a television show, it was so well received, but it was almost well received in a laughing stock way. As I mentioned, bad auditions is a staple part of the X Factor, and it has been from the very first episode. People would make these into memes before memes were even a thing. They would become almost like niche celebrities. But not only were the bad contestants like made fun out of, the winners and live finalists were made fun out of as well. None of them really made much noise or success after their first year in the music industry. They were deemed as flops. Sorry, if you called someone a flop in 2004, I think that would send them into a coma. They were deemed as like the bottom barrel of the music industry. None of them had any sort of weight to their name. God, I'm coming for them. I'm sorry, Jesus Christ. Girl, get your feelings out. How do you really feel about Shane Ward? But what I mean is like they were seen as like cheap and like karaoke singers and not pop stars, basically. All until Leona Lewis. Leona was the eventual winner of Series 3, and she was a star, baby. There could be 100 people in the room and 99 don't believe in you, but all it takes is one and it could change your whole life. Except from it wasn't one, it was millions of people in the United Kingdom households phoning up and voting for her. Leona won with the single A Moment Like This, and despite the fact it was the 20th December and it was basically the year was up, she still was the second biggest selling single of 2006. It sold 571,000 copies in its first week. And just for context, at the time, obviously streaming services weren't a thing. So if you wanted to listen to a song, you had to go out and buy it. This was obviously another money-making scheme for Psycho and X Factor and Simon Cowell, because these people have just phoned up and voted for the past 12 weeks for that person to get their single out. They're obviously then going to go out and buy it and support them. Just in terms of how big Leona's single was, as I said, she sold 571,000 copies, which is more than the rest of the top 40 combined that week. My baby was a star! I think a lot of this came from the choice of the winning single. Obviously, it was titled A Moment Like This, which is very fitting. You've just won the X Factor and you're singing A Moment Like This. Oh, even Shakespeare couldn't say I love you better. It adds to the audience buying into her journey and wanting to go out and buy that single. Within that year, Leona would have the fastest selling debut album ever to be released in the UK. That same album would also be the fastest album to reach 1 million sales by a solo female in the UK. It still remains to this day the best-selling debut album in the UK by a female artist, and in general, one of the best-selling albums of the 21st century. Plus, her follow-up single, Bleeding Love, not only went #1 in the UK, it went #1 in America. She cracked America. She jumped the pond, something that so many people have tried to do and can't. And it was not only #1 in the USA, it was #1 for 4 weeks. For a little bit of context, if you care to listen. This was the first track by a UK female to go #1 in the USA. Since 1987. In 1987, You Keep Me Hanging On went #1, and it wouldn't be until 20 years later, Leona Lewis from a little show called The X Factor would break that dry spell. It wasn't only the success in numbers, Leona was becoming a reputable musician that the industry actually respected, which, as I said, would be a first for an X Factor contestant. From her debut album, she went on to have multiple top 10, resulting in multiple awards, including Brit Awards and a Grammy. A Grammy! I don't know how I can even begin to explain how crazy it was that an X Factor winner was being nominated for a Grammy. To this day, she is the only X Factor contestant to be nominated for a Grammy other than Harry Styles, which... Are we counting him? Because it's not technically as One Direction. Leona Lewis proved that going on the X Factor doesn't mean that you're a cabaret singer. Doesn't mean that you'll have a #1 Christmas single and fall off and probably be on Strictly Come Dancing in a couple years. Leona proved that you could be a global superstar. And after this season, I think is when Simon Cowell's money eyes started blinging and he realized how much of a beast this show could become. The production meddling and the production feeding you information had been there from the very start, but Leona's success proved to Simon that this could be a success like the UK had never seen before, and he was going to make sure that that happened. I feel like now we've sort of given the context of the show in the first few series, it's a good time to get into the claims of rigging, how the producers want you to take information, because I am going to be speaking about it a lot, and I feel like it's good to give context now, so when I reference it, I don't have to keep being like, I'll get to that later, because there's rhyme and reason to this show.
I'm ready.
Well, you said that with some determination.
I'm ready.
Okay. Whenever you're ready.
If you have ever heard of the X Factor, you would definitely heard it come hand in hand with, oh, that show's rigged. Simon Cowell just chooses who he wants to be the winner, blah, blah, blah. I have no evidence myself in the fact that they have never ever tampered with the votes. I'm just going off the strong assumption that the legality issues that they would run into if they were messing with people's money that they've put into it, it's not worth the risk when they can kind of control it themselves. But just because the winner is solely decided by the public vote doesn't mean that the public is actually choosing who the winner is. Journalist Marina High perfectly described it as a subliminally hypnotic master plan. The entire span of a season of X Factor is thought out from the jump. If you didn't already know, the first time we as the audience see the contestant, we are also made to believe that it's the first audition for them. And while it may be the first time that the judges have seen them, it is not their first audition. Preliminary rounds prior to getting on the show. This can be as 3 to 4 to 5 rounds where producers at a lower level to Simon Cowell will sit through the hundreds of thousands who actually applied and pick out the people who are bad and will create the good TV for the bad audition. They'll pick out the people who are good and could potentially have a storyline or a sub story. While you're auditioning, you'll be asked questions about your backstory, all this other stuff, and you'll go through all of these auditions until you're actually given a date that you will sing in front of the judges themselves. But this is pretty common knowledge. These preliminary rounds are there for a reason. The producers' heads are working in terms of who they want to focus on and who they're gonna pre-select to sort of be their finalists before they even sing in front of the judges. I used this blog called Surviving Reality TV, which was written by Sophia Wardman, who is a member of the 2010 X Factor finalist girl group Bellamy. I'm going to read an extract of the day that she turned up to her first audition in front of the judges. So this was after she had sung multiple times in front of other producers and other people who worked on the show, but the time that she was actually going to sing in front of the judges. Once the madness had settled, we were then queuing for our contestant number, after which I was asked by ITV2 to do some filming with them. I was confused as to why I was asked out of everybody there. I was obviously buzzing, so went along to meet Connie and the filming crew. To my amazement, they already had this whole I Love Scarborough skit planned out for us to film. They put me back into the queue of people, which were now actually the audition audience waiting to head in. Another fun fact for you, you know those panning shots of the huge crowds as they go, thousands apply! They aren't the auditionee. They are the audience waiting to go in to watch. Connie then asked me the pre-planned questions and answers we just discussed. She had an I Love Scarborough t-shirt and everything ready to hand to me. The conspiracy head turned on. Why are they going to all these lengths just for me? I haven't even auditioned yet. Surely this means I've got a good chance of getting to the next round. And getting to the next round, she did. While they've already whittled it down, there's still got to be fodder because hundreds make it to boot camp. Most of those hundreds will not have been interviewed once by Dermot. About 80% of those contestants will have just turned up, sung, and gone gone home. And needed there almost as background characters, as extras. You buy into the story of that there was so many people and they've been whittled down to just these few. The producers know exactly what information they need to feed to you in order for you to believe the narrative that they want to put out. And this is done from the very first audition episode. It is sort of an unwritten rule in X Factor that the people who go far will be placed in the very first audition episode of a season. You had Stacey Solomon, Daniel Johnson, and eventual winner Joe McElderry in the first episode in Series 6, and that is because it gives them the most amount of time to stay in your mind. Also gives them enough time to appear in the press, have tabloid stories run about them. The show ultimately wants to make money, and obviously the way to do this while the show is on is through the phone voting. In order for you to feel inspired enough to pick up the phone and actually spend your hard-earned cash on these random people who you've never met before, they have to get you to believe and buy into a story. Whether it's someone who you saw in the audition who was completely shy, journey from insecurity to amazing voices in the live show, and you feel like that you've been through that journey with them, or it's a joke act in the sense of Jedward or Wagner. Simon seems to be so frustrated. He doesn't understand how the public could possibly be voting for these people. People are voting for them because they're getting a kick out and spend their money to ruin the show. Or maybe you're a tween girl in the early 2000s and the early 2010s, and you're begging your parents to vote for the latest inoffensive, average-looking white boy on the show. Other stereotype casted each season was the tabloid machine, which was casted, and they weren't necessarily cast because they were popular with the audience and they were going to make loads of money through them through the phone voting. They were casted because the press was running stories on them every week and creating controversy, bringing in new viewers because they were intrigued by these people. Again, like I mentioned, Frankie Kokoza, and another example is Katie Brucknell. There was a plethora of different stereotype casts in order to get you invested, but towards the end of the show, they need to steer the audience in the direction of the act that is going to sell the most records and make the most money for the longest time after the show. And I know some of you might be like, oh, it's a live reality show. They can't control that much. So I'm going to go through just a few examples and tactics that the producers would use in order for the Great British public to believe the storylines that they wanted. As much as these things like happen, it is conspiracy. There's no actual evidence that the producers actually do all this. So these points I'm about to say are pure theory. This is the science of X Factor voting. Number 1, the running order of the show. Humans have short attention spans, and that was 20 years ago. God alone knows how an X Factor with the age of TikTok attention spans would work. It would need to be 15-second performances. As I said, people have short attention spans, especially if you have to sit through 16 people singing a song. Who sang first? Who sang second? Who? Gonna remember that. Which is why the final spot was sort of labeled as the pimp slot. You would be put at the end of the show if the producers wanted you to go through to next week, because that is going to be the last thing in the audience's mind and the lines open. Which puts you in a lot better chance than the first person who sang 2 hours ago, 15 people ago. And if the producers wanted someone to go home, take a guess where they would go. Numero uno. Only one. A contestant called Ashley Mackenzie was the only person to ever be last in the running order and land in the bottom 2. Another thing that the producers will do is a geographical call out. British people are stereotypically patriotic. They want to back their country. They want to back where they came from, especially back in the day. God knows this country has gone to SHIT long far back as Series 2, where it was the Conway sisters versus Maria Lawson, and Ofcom actually got complaints because Sharon Osbourne called this out and called the great Irish public the Irish Mafia. The strongest case of this was final of Series 4 between Leon Jackson, who was Scottish, and Ridian Roberts, who was Welsh. Every sort of promo was amplified as it's Wales versus Scotland. The judges' comments were very important and very thought out. For example, if an act was good, you were sat there going, well done, mama.
Well done, mama.
And then the judges were like, not sure, wasn't great. You'd be like, hold on a minute. I'm worried for her this week because the judges are saying she's bad, but she's really good. I need to vote to make sure she stays. But it wasn't just down to praise and criticism. There was buzzwords that would be used in order to paint an image on someone. The song choice played a big part. I mean, this is sort of self-explanatory. The contestants didn't have free choice over what they would sing in the live shows. Not really in the auditions either, but we'll get to that. If the judges wanted to set them up, for example, contestant Sammy Brooks was in the overs category, and she was your typical 31-year-old. They made her sing I Will Always Love You, which is, you know, it's fabulous song, do not get me wrong, but in terms of X Factor, it's been done. Circling back to the judges' comments one and this, the judges sort of leveled her to a cruise ship singer, that she shouldn't be singing cruise ship songs. Blurp, what happened? She went home that week. And speaking of Gary saying that she was a cruise ship singer in her VTs, the VTs prior that was played to like get to know the acts better to the performer actually singing were just as, if not more important than the actual performance itself. For example, in the first week of 2010, there was 3 groups who got through. Bellamy, FYD, and of course, One Direction. In that very first VT, we got individual introductions to each single member of One Direction, which is very important. It makes you feel more connected to them. Don't just view them as like one like act that you don't really know. You know 5 people individually now. Whereas Bellamy and FYD were more focused on their performance and not them as people. It immediately erases any personal connection and makes you less likely to pick up the phone and vote. The week that Wagner went home in the VT, Simon decided to say, if people want to spend their own hard money on keeping Wagner in the show, then let them. While that would probably go over the head of most people, subliminally reminding you, you people, you losers sat at home, jobless freaks are spending your hard-earned cash on this. Like, that's really loser behavior. And this isn't just a live shows thing. This starts from the very first time that you see a contestant, when everyone used to be like, all X Factor are now is sob stories, blah, blah, blah. That was so you would buy into it. Jade Richards, who was a contestant on the X Factor, actually revealed that when she auditioned, those shots that you see of them in their hometown prior to their audition, that's actually shot after they've sung. They will do their audition, and then if they think that this is going to be a success story, they'll then be like, okay, do you have a date where we can come to your house and film you and do all that stuff? And the VTs were also important to save an act for the sympathy bounce back. If one of the producers' favorites fell into the bottom, they were going to be able to save them the next week. A lot of the time, contestants such as like Tamira and Katie Waisel, they would bounce back from being in the bottom, not in the bottom, bottom, not in the bottom, and that's how they would survive each week and get on. Quite often at the pimp slot, their whole VT would be surrounded by, this is the biggest deal to me, I need to go out there and prove myself this week. Judges' comments will be like, you killed it, proved your place in this competition, to like make the viewers be like, yeah, she does deserve another week. And it wasn't just on the show in the way that they would control who you like and who you're gonna vote. The British press played a huge part in X Factor. As I said, the show was gigantic. Everybody says how big Love Island is. This show had 15 more million viewers at its peak than Love Island at its peak. Every front page newspaper had a story about the X Factor. Every magazine wanted to be given the X Factor exclusive scoops. Simon Cowell was close friends with Max Clifford, who was a very famous publicist and had control over a lot of the media. So even after implementing all these previous tactics to try and get the audience to get someone out that they don't want in the competition anymore, if that still wasn't working, all he had to do was ding 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 up Max Clifford and get them to run some bad story to get the public thinking that they're a bad person. The public defacing of a contestant, like for example, Janet Devlin, who wasn't fitting the mold that the producers wanted her to do. And all of a sudden articles started running in the papers being like, oh, rumors that Janet is a diva backstage. Now, of course, this doesn't always work. Joe McElderry won over Ollie Murs. Matt Cardle won over One Direction and Cher Lloyd. Everyone always says, oh, well, you know, the runners-up are always more successful. I've noticed that it's usually the case the runners-up are more successful are on the cases where a boring man won, who the producers probably didn't want to win, instead of the young, fun pop act, who then got signed to the Psycho label anyway and still got the exact same deal as the winners. And that concludes your lesson in X Factor Storytelling 101. Sorry that took so long, but I'm about to reference all these other points in all these seasons coming up because they come up quite a bit. I just thought I'd get that out of the way here, and we can dive right back in where we left off. Bookmark chapter Series 4. Series 4 was back after the success of Leona Lewis, and the contestants' minimum age of application was lowered to 14 years old. 14. But this lowering of age actually did get a lot of criticism. Groups like Family and Parenting Institute were like, this is ridiculous. These are literal children who should be in school studying for their GCSE maths exam, Edexcel Paper 1, and not on national TV singing, there's a hero all alone. I found it really interesting that in the first episode, Simon said the line, school kids versus old age pensioners. It doesn't get more diverse than that when talking about this year's lineup. But then when you look at the actual final lineup, other than the removed contestant who was 15, the youngest was 18 and the oldest was 38. That's a 20-year span. So this whole allure of there is so many people auditioning just to get you to buy into the like, and this could be anyone. It could be my old granddad Jimmy, when really it's literally just a span of 20 years. I also found it really interesting watching the first episode of the series that this was the first time the Christmas #1 was packaged into the win like it was a guaranteed thing. That would come back to bite them in the arse in future years. And I've kind of made it a thing to not like go through every bad audition from each series, because otherwise I could literally be sat here all day, go through some of the iconic auditions of X Factor past. But I have to give 10, where 10 is due, because Rachel Lester auditioned on this season. The show started off with drama, with controversy, with nation shock as it was announced that Louis Walsh was fired from the show and the show's choreographer, Brian Friedman, would be replacing him. Alongside Danny Minogue, Louis had left. Oh my gosh, these new people were here. I need to tune into the show to see how this is ever going to work out. Spoiler alert, Louis Walsh joins the show again in 2 weeks' time. Theatrics and the drama this season, the producers and the editors were taking a leaf out of the EastEnders Christmas special book. Like, please just watch the drama of this promo trailer for Judges House's results.
I do know that my family loves me.
one shot.
I don't want to live my life anymore.
I'm gonna have to send you home.
As the X Factor Final 12 are revealed.
I can't do any more.
What trauma did these producers put these people through to incite that type of fear? These people are acting like they're on the sinking Titanic. Anyway, there's nothing really to write home about this season. It was sort of just like an incubator season. Sharon and Danny literally despised each other, and this was public knowledge. They actually commented on the feud. Danny stated, "As for Sharon, you don't click with everybody, but it's her choice not to be friends. Apparently she's envious because I'm younger and prettier." Ooh, girl! And Simon commented on the feud saying that if Sharon wants to leave the show, she can. Not everyone's gonna be best of buddies. She did leave the show. So rumors of Danny and Simon flirting. But speaking of the judges, this series, Simon actually came forward and said that judges would take a step back in terms of being so involved with the contestants' fate on the show and taking a more impartial stance. There's still competition within the judges, but our job essentially is to find a star. I think that Leona has completely upped the ante now on the show, and there's no turning back. We're looking for an international standard of acts that can sell millions of albums. And remember when I said that Leona gained global success? Dermot, who was the new host of the show, also referenced this, emphasizing that it's going to be an international panel, obviously with Danny from Australia, and Brian Friedman was on the original lineup, who is American. But they really were taking Leona's success as serious, really featuring it as like a part of the show, which they had never done with any previous acts before. But the main source of controversy from this season came from 15-year-old contestant Emily Nakanda. She was actually the only act to make the live shows who was under the age of 16, and then a video surfaced online of her, which was quote-unquote happy slapping incident. I don't know if I'm too young, but I didn't really know what happy slapping meant, but I remember this controversy like it was the world ending. You know those things when you were younger which were made into the world's biggest deal, like Tiger Woods cheating? This was my Tiger Woods cheating. She was removed from the show. I mean, to be honest, she shouldn't have been on the show originally because under 16-year-olds have no place on a reality competition, never mind a competition as intense as the X Factor. And for the following year, the age limit was moved back up. The final was watched by 12 million people, with Leon Jackson winning. There was actually accusations of voting irregularities with this. Remember when I mentioned the Iridian Roberts from Wales versus Leon Jackson versus Scotland? This is all this. And the other finalists were a brother and a sister duo called Same Difference, who continued to sing love songs each week. What the fuck? Season just felt a bit frumpy. There was accusations that the previous season's like standard of talent wasn't that good, so I feel like they fell down like making sure that these were the best singers. Felt a bit like back to that cruise ship karaoke singing competition and especially with Leona, who was gaining more and more success and just like blowing out the park. Anyone from this series even like nowhere near touching her success. Series needed a revamp for Series 5. The show needed to be marketed to the scale of Leona Lewis's career. It didn't need to be this like duddy talent show where people sang a Whitney Houston song and then they'd go through to the live shows and jive a little bit. It needed to be more of a spectacle. It needed to be glossy. It needed to be sleek. After the back that literally no one from the series really had much success, they needed to come back with some stars. Following series would be the first series that we saw nation sweetheart Cheryl, back then named Cheryl Cole, taking the place of Sharon on the judging panel. She was a younger skewing demographic than the likes of Louis and Simon and Sharon and even Danny. Cheryl had just been in the UK's biggest girl group for the past few years and was really popular with the teen audience. And on top of that, she came from a talent show herself. She was a contestant on Popstars, which I mentioned earlier, which was the predecessor to X Factor. I found a Guardian article from 2008 which was headlined "Reality Show Pop Star Who Turned Out to Have the Real X Factor," and it basically just gushes over Cheryl. Her success has been celebrated by tabloid headlines, all there, the nation's sweetheart and our Geordie princess, cliched glory. Glittery warmth has helped her to outshine her fellow judges. Even the normally attention-hogging Simon Cowell reportedly offered her a 100% pay rise to come back for another series. Cheryl was a really key factor to this season, giving the X Factor that oomph back. She made it cool again, she made it fresh, it wasn't fuddy-duddy. It was the first time that we had a charity single. Now, these charity singles used to be the shit. I used to beg my mum to buy me these charity singles. It was basically this thing where all of the acts would come together and they'd all sing like a line of a song each, and the profits of the single would go towards a charity. Lovely, lovely cause. But those music videos, the dramatics as Alexandra Burke poured her heart out. Oh! And this series was back with a bang. It had auditionees like Alexandra Burke, JLS, Ruth Lorenzo, and it had some of the most famous bad, in quotation, auditions to date. Ariel Burdett, Holly Jervis, and Ant and Seb in one season. Oh, we were eating back in 2008. All these auditions brought a field day press. The bads, the good. So much so that the bad auditions became so viral this year that brought back all the bad auditionees to do a performance together at the live show. As iconic as this is, looking back, I just feel so bad, especially when you get context of how these people got onto the show. You know when you watch X Factor and it's like, these people clearly cannot hold a tune or a note. How are they so deluded that they think that they could come onto national television and sing this song? Well, the reason is because the producers convinced them that they're good. And all these pre-rounds, they're like, you're a star, baby. So when they come on and then they are SHIT and the judges are like, you're crap. Well, they're like, sorry, what? I've literally just done 4 prior auditions. Your people have been telling me how good I am. The show was big. We were bringing in 12 million viewers nightly. The final was getting up to 14 million. And it became a thing where celebrities were starting to wanting to get involved. You had artists coming on and singing, but if you look back at the previous season sort of musical guests, it's Westlife, it's Girls Aloud, it's previous winner Shane Ward. They're famous in the UK, it's a good slot, but it's not anything to write home about. This series had A-list global phenomenons. I definitely said that. Third Now Ma'am coming in to do their promo. This was Britney Spears' UK comeback. You had Mariah freaking Carey coming in and doing a masterclass for the girl. And you had one of, if not the most iconic performance in X Factor history. Beyonce Knowles coming along to sing a duet with eventual winner Alexandra Burke. And as much as like ridiculous X Factor was, this one of the best like things I've ever seen on television in my life. I get goosebumps when I watch that performance because you could see the sheer like shock in Alexandra singing a Beyonce song with the lady herself. It was watching someone's dream come true in front of your own eyes. This was the best press slot that artists could get to promote their music in the UK. Everything about this season just felt huge. Even down to the judge, like Dani was brought to tears when she was accused of stealing a song.
Well, she was very good, wasn't she?
She was great.
It was an amazing performance. I would never, ever steal anyone else's song. I had absolute right to choose that.
Like, baby girl, it ain't that deep. Your paycheck is still the same. It was so huge that it was brought up in the House of Commons. When contestant Laura White was eliminated, it was quoted to be said, MPs should resist the temptation to comment on editorial matters. Although the temptation is great in my case, having seen the wonderful and talented Laura White very harshly voted off X Factor on Saturday. Like, this show was huge. There is nothing in the UK that is ever compared in my lifetime to how big this show was. And the producers working overtime was paying off because the finalists saw younger, cooler, more up-to-date with the current music market than the previous season. We had Alexandra Burke, we had JLS, we had Owen Quick, we had Diana Vickers. They were all young talent. And it was that shift of getting rid of your regular everyday people that have previously won the show and instead showcasing acts who are ready to walk straight off the show. And remember when I said the amped up drama? Like, remember when I showed you that Judge's Houses trailer? I completely forgot to mention the biggest drama of it all this season. Diana Vickers getting laryngitis. Diana Vickers getting laryngitis.
My throat is just like it's broken. The doctor said that I have a severe case of laryngitis.
Really sad that Diana couldn't show up today.
She had Mariah Carey terrified for the prospect of Diana Vickers' health. Also, we had the relationship between Diana and Owen, which when Owen got announced that he was in the final over Diana, you would think that she was being sent to the slaughterhouse, the poor girl. He was acting like he was never seeing this woman again. Again, I feel like I'm repeating a broken horse, but the whole Diana being ill and will she, won't she be able to sing this week, and Diana and Owen's whirlwind romance. It was easy writing for the press to write about. And this wasn't in the age of social media. You couldn't go to someone's page to figure out what they had to say, or you couldn't just check X Factor's Instagram to see if Diana was going to sing this week. You were having to tune in every Saturday night to see how this was playing out. And a case of FOMO was quickly progressing where it's like, if you weren't watching X Factor when you came to school on Monday or work on Monday, there was no Twitter back then. You know how now you have all the discourse about Love Island on hashtag Love Island? You had to wait until your Monday when you were back in work and school to be able to talk about this. And if you weren't watching, baby girl, you were sat twiddling your thumbs for the first Monday morning. TV critic Emma Bullymore said, when Alexandra Burke is doing a duet with Beyonce in the final, that is a big deal. And when they are filling Wembley Arena for the final, again, that was a big ideal. It was a national event every time X Factor came along. Alexandra Burke won! Alexandra Burke released Hallelujah. It was actually the fastest ever selling X Factor single to this day. Alexandra's Hallelujah has the European record for the most singles sold in 24 hours and the top selling single of 2008. I think it was the most highest selling single thanks to this iconic moment right here.
Everyone who voted for me, this is for you. I swear to God, it's for you. I love you, family.
She has taken on.
She was making sure she was selling us that record. By January 2009, the single had sold over 1 million copies, which was a first for a British female artist. She would then go on that year to have 2 more #1 singles, 6 top 10 singles, and a #1 debut album. And it wasn't just Alexandra who was seeing chart success. In the year following the series, JLS had 2 #1 singles, Diana Vickers had 1 #1 single, and even 8th place contestant Laura White was scoring top 40 singles. And the final drew in 14 million viewers, making it the most watched talent show of all time. The X Factor hype was huge. The following season started with a bang. Every act who would go on to top the votes each week in the live show was featured in this first episode. We had the eventual winner Joe McElderry, we had Stacey Solomon, we also had the birth of Jedward. You had like Chico Time, and you had Same Different, like cabaret novelty acts, but this was the first act who was like publicly deemed in their audition as bad. Usually the bad people don't go past the audition stage. At a push, make it to boot camp, but they're weeded out to like show the show as like a serious talent show by the time it gets to the live shows. But Jedward was the first act who would audition and be deemed as bad, but still make it to the live show. And off the back of Alexandra and JLS and Diana having a huge year and being pop stars in the UK, this would also be the first time that the auditions would change from a small, intimate room to actually performing on stage. This caused a lot of backlash to the audience. They were not a fan of it. Even Cheryl herself and previous act JLS, they criticized it for the lack of intimacy, but to me, the reason why they changed this was to show the sort of scale of the show. The fact that you are straight away needed to be able to perform in front of a huge audience sort of sets it up that you can't just be a singer anymore, you need to be a performer. And I feel like a really good example in this series about it being screen time over vocal ability is Stacey Solomon. Stacey was a good singer, but her other 2 girls who were in her category, Lucy Jones and Rachel Adedeji, were technically a lot more able singers. And Lucy had a little bit of airtime. Rachel pretty much was non-existent in the show's edit leading up to the live shows. Definitely planned out. Even by the time you get to the live shows, these girls are better singers. You have no connection to them. You don't care about them. Still putting good singers through so people don't complain about the standard of the show, but they're making sure those good singers don't get a look into the final whatever by making sure their plan A had way more screen time then and already built such a public rapport. Stacey had this girl next door. She was, oh my God, I can't believe I'm actually here on the show. She was made to be a really rootable character. Like you wanted to get behind her. And I found some clips. Wait, just watch Stacey Solomon and how she speaks after she does her performance and is interviewed by Dermot. Just watch how she speaks.
Oh, I loved it, but sorry, I didn't look comfortable. Can't please them all. Because you know when you do something good and you're like, oh no, what's not good last time? So I was like, oh my gosh.
And people love this act. People love the whole goofiness and the juxtaposition between this girl on stage singing really well, looking glamorous, and then coming off me like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. Which garnered her a lot of fans. Fellow contestant Lucy Jones quite clearly clocked onto this and decided to start copying her mannerisms in hope of the same fate.
I really enjoyed. I like that song, and it's like it's cool, and it's like Disney. I know. Like, can you imagine? Like, it's like I will always love you, and now I'm doing like yeah.
And I get why she would do that. If producers aren't favoring you, you have to take matters into your own hands, and you're seeing this person do that, and it's like, well, let me try that. I do want to point out, remember the sympathy bounce? Rachel Adedeji has one of the craziest sympathy bounces. She was in the bottom 2 for the first 2 weeks, and as I said, she was a very, very talented singer, so everybody was like, girl, Rachel, what are you doing down there? What are you doing in the bottom? You're a really good singer. And she came out and took the biscuit week 3. She did Proud Mary, Tina Turner, and to this date, she is the only contestant in X Factor history to go from the bottom to topping the vote the following week. Did she go home the next week? Yeah, but let's not speak about that detail. Also, she gave us the iconic Rachel Adedeji.
Rachel Adedeji.
My one goal in life is to have my name read out by that man. Speaking of Lucy Jones, who I just mentioned, she actually caused the biggest controversy when Jedward stayed over Lucy Jones. This would result in over 1,000 Ofcom complaints based off the standard that it is a singing competition and Lucy was by far the better singer. And this is when the rigging claims started to come in like really properly. Simon would constantly every week say things like, the fact it's a singing competition and they can't sing.
Arguably, actually not arguably, the worst live performance I've ever sat through.
and would continue to put Jedward down, obviously in order to get the public to vote. When it came to Lucy, a very talented singer, and Jedward in the bottom two, Simon still decided to save Jedward on the claims that neither were going to win, so he should just let the public decide.
I'm going to let the public decide.
Obviously, this caused absolute outrage, and then it just stirred up more people the next week to vote for Jedward again to piss off the judges more. It was really, I feel like, in this time where the light bulbs were going above Simon and the producers' heads, and they were realizing how gullible the UK public actually were, and how people were genuinely sat at home thinking that, oh my god, the more that we vote for these people, we're annoying them and not actually just putting money straight into their pocket. But Jed would have been extremely critical of the show post-show, and a lot of contestants have been as well. I know Cher Lloyd has, Katie Waisel has, Rebecca Ferguson. The vibe that I get, it's all quite cryptic, and I think that they're in a very extremely complicated NDA contract, allegedly. They have to sign a contract, and it's basically sign the contract or you're not going on the show. And obviously people are going to sign the contract. Jedward tweeted out, the biggest regret in life was not telling the judges on X Factor to F off. Every contestant on the X Factor was a slave to the show and got paid zero while they made millions. And I wanted to speak about that tweet that they made nothing, because as I've been mentioning, these artists have been having crazy success, and they're showing that people can actually be musicians successful after the show. The contract that they have to sign on the show allegedly is not the best. 2008 contract was exposed that the artists themselves would only receive 15% from single and album sales, 7.5% from tour, and 15% of merchandise sales. The winner of the show also has to sign to Modest Management, which was a tie and Psycho, so Simon would still have continued control over their careers, and the potential to last up to 14 years. Now, here the numbers break down. It is crazy how little the actual artist putting in the work gets paid, but it's kind of industry standard, as far as I'm aware. I've done a bit of research into record labels and contracts, especially nowadays with 360 contract. Artists get screwed over a lot by record labels. But I think the main point is that you have to sign to Simon Cowell's record label and you have to sign to a management affiliated with him. Circling back to the fact that anyone in this X Factor machine is fully controlled by Simon Cowell. For example, if a winner wins who wasn't his picked out winner, it's not a surprise that they didn't succeed in their career. Oh my god, how did I forget? The season was also bisexual gay. That sounds weird out of context. Daniel Johnson was a contestant in the over 25s, and he was actually the early favorite to win. And during a performance of Jennifer Hudson's I Am Telling You, changed the lyric from the best man I've ever known to the best girl I've ever known. During the live shows, there was also tabloid press leaks outing Daniel as allegedly being bisexual. Ugh, it's all very icky, extremely gross. Like, I've done some research into it, and his ex-girlfriend came out and said stuff like, the people have no morals. Danny Minogue made quite possibly maybe the worst joke in television history. I've never seen a joke go down so badly. And the fact that this was 2009 and the joke was going down that badly, girl.
If we're to believe everything we read in the paper, maybe you didn't need to change the gender reference in it.
What?
No?
What did you say? What did you say?
I said if we're to believe everything we read in the paper, he didn't need to change the gender reference in it. No, don't believe it.
And the whole speculation around him really cut his chances, because people, when they looked at him, were thinking of this whole press speculation and all this kind of stuff, and it wasn't just about him and his singing anymore. The series gave us the iconic birth of this Cheryl Cole Fight for This Love performance, ingrained in my brain. When I close my eyes and die, this will be the last thing that I see. It was a serious case of the anti-X Factor. I feel like Jed would really birth this, because I remember when I was younger, my older brother would hate X Factor, but he would always watch the auditions because he found the bad people funny. And obviously he wasn't the only one, and X Factor knew that people would be less interested once the sort of funniness went. I feel like they pulled Jedward along to the live shows to see if those viewers would follow through. And I think because those viewers were keeping up for so long, there was this huge campaign this year to block X Factor from being the Christmas #1 for the first time, and have a band called Rage Against the Machine become Christmas #1. Jedward had enticed this whole sort of anti-X Factor vote. So there was a campaign, Facebook campaign, and they actually won. Rage Against the Machine actually got the Christmas #1, and Joe McKelvey would be the first X Factor winner to not score #1. This series was so big that the Prime Minister at the time even commented on it. He was backing Stacey Solomon, and he didn't quite get Jedward. But the show was everywhere. It was the most successful series so far, and it seemed like it wasn't slowing down. It was only about to get even bigger.
I hear Jerusalem, bells are ring-a-dinging.
Series 7, 2010 X Factor. If I could save one thing from my childhood time on Earth, it would be a taped recording of 2010 X Factor to show to a child held in 100 years' time. It is a work of art. Already you knew the season was gonna bang, and the first audition episode was the show's highest rating ever. We as the public knew about Cheryl's case of malaria, which was genuinely really scary, but the way the show played on this.
I don't feel well at all. I'm definitely coming down with something.
Are you ill?
Cheryl Cole has collapsed.
The poor girl. Interest was peaking from day of auditions. Contestants this year were a tabloid minefield. You had Katie Waisel coming on, and she was being accused of already having record deals and being famous in America under another name. You had acts like Chloe Mafia, party girl. She actually had a kid and she had to go on This Morning and address it. This was the season of Ablisa, the most watched X Factor performance. These auditions were viral. This was pre-influencers, pre-all that stuff. So when you went onto YouTube, other than like random crap uploaded that would just get millions of views for no reason, like Charlie Bit My Finger, you would be watching these X Factor clips on repeat. They were also accused of voice altering, which, looking back, and I just can't wait for the day when you walk out my door. Yeah, no shit, girl, that's auto-tune. But just know the auditions were huge, and after every Saturday audition episode, the papers would be filled with stories. Going into boot camp, the public's favorite seemed to be Mary Bryn, who was a 51-year-old who worked at Tesco, Cher Lloyd, who was the 16-year-old mini Cheryl Cole, Aidan Grimshaw, Gamu. The boot camp was also like shimmied up a little bit to give more pop star energy. You had to be able to dance and perform, and the introduction of dancing at boot camp also was the introduction of Zayn Malik. And I really found this interesting watching this boot camp episode. We had not seen Zayn before in the auditions, as far as I'm aware. Now all of a sudden he had this huge segment, this random boy out of nowhere about not being able to dance. The foreshadowing to pimp up One Direction is crazy compared to the screen time of the girl group equivalent got. Speaking of the girl group equivalent, again from Sophia Wardman from Bellamy's blog, are explaining about her boot camp story. During the wait, our newly formed clique noticed a car pulling up outside and a camera crew running over to film whoever the apparent VIP was. Watching intently, a tiny girl stepped out of the car, Cher Lloyd. Bearing in mind no auditions had been aired on TV, why was she being filmed? None of us had been yet, only walking into the building as a collective. Why was she so special? And then the space for conspiracy was created. The fact that she was pulled up in a Mercedes and filmed from the jump, they had their plan A's before things were even started. This boot camp gave us the iconic line, Jerusalem, bells are ring-a-dingin'. I hear Jerusalem, bells are ring-a-dingin'. We as a nation just collectively agree that that was the best thing that we had ever heard. Also, before we move on from boot camp, One Direction and Bellamy were formed here. As I said, they were the sort of like manufactured girl group and boy group. This actually got a lot of slack because everybody was like, there was amazing groups already, like they should have been given a chance instead. Simon is obviously going to have a lot more control over a group that he put together rather than a group who have their own artistic vision and have been practicing for years. But I do want to say this wasn't the first group that was put together. One Direction, Harry Styles himself needs to give credit to Miss Frank for their success. Miss Frank was a girl trio from the previous season. And basically, if you aren't clued up in X Factor, I've not gone into every specific detail of every stage because that's an hour video on its own. But one of the stages of boot camp is the soloists sort of have to sing a song together to speed up to get through people, because if they sat and listened to everyone all day, it would be so long. 3 girls from the previous season sang together as solo artists, and they sounded good together. So the judges were just like, we had no plan for either of you guys as solo artists, but you guys sound good, so we can do that. And they don't get the credit. If it wasn't for them, I don't know if One Direction would exist to this day. This season has a lot to speak about because we're only at judges' houses, and this is when the drama actually kicks in. The girls category probably has X Factor's biggest scandal ever, when Tracy Cohen and Cheryl Cole could not quite agree on when they were ready.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Well, you said that with some determination.
I'm ready.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
Obviously, I'm speaking about Gamu Gates. Gamu had one of the public's favorite auditions. The public adored her. Got to judges' houses, and Gamu gave a great performance. The other 2 current favorites were Katie Waisel and Cher Lloyd, and they both flopped. Katie kind of just fluffed up and was not good.
Sorry.
And Cher had a sore voice. She just broke down mid-performance. Cheryl even asked her if she wanted to go again, and she was like, no, I'm done. I think she was literally like the writings on the walls, like, I can't be asked. For some reason, despite the fact that they weren't even able to complete their song, Cher and Katie got through, and Gamu didn't. This got the public in a way that I have never seen the public rally together before. These two girls who stumbled away through their performances were going through, and to add salt to the wound, a wild card was then announced so that each judge would be taken through a wild card to the live show. Gamu still wasn't picked. Hundreds and thousands of people joined a Facebook group called Gamu Should Have Got Through, and we still don't know to this day the real reason why Gamu was axed. I guess as far as the clues that we have been given and can put together, it was just they saw more success with the other three. There was a lot of rumors that it was actually due to visa issues, but Cheryl shut that down, so I guess we just have to take Cheryl's word for that. And she said that it was her gut instinct was the reason. And in her 2012 autobiography, Cheryl said that she chose Waisel for the live shows because she was more entertaining. She says, and I quote, "Cowell had spent the past 2 years drumming into me that we needed acts who would be good TV. She had the character and drive it took to withstand the pressures of the show, and so I put her through." Things got so bad that Cheryl's security on the show had to be stepped up. She had to be constantly followed by bodyguards because of the amount of death threats she was receiving. And Gamu's street in her home in a small town in Scotland had to be closed off by police because crowds of protesters were gathering with banners saying, "Bring back Gamu." And the girls want to say that Love Island has an impact nowadays. I have found this article which gives an interesting take on why Gamu was eliminated, which I agree with. Even among such stiff competition, arguably the most absurd aspect of the whole business is the suggestion that Cowell has made a misstep in excluding Gamu. To get some perspective on his howler, let's consider a previous observation of reality TV Mark Darnell. Mike was once asked if he rued anything about Who's Your Daddy. His only regret, the inevitable controversy that the show generated, was outside the program, so it didn't translate into ratings. It seems reasonable to suspect Cowell holds a similar worldview. If the Gamu saga results in significant numbers of viewers switching off their sets in disgust, then we can start talking about missteps. But if come Saturday night, the X Factor ratings only increase, then I think we may chalk up another victory and salute him once again for creating a system so devilishly shock-proof that the house always wins. And they're right, the ratings didn't go down. In fact, they increased. It was all a ploy. Who's surprised? Anyone? Take to the stage. I've spoken a lot about this, so let's just whirl through some of these iconic moments from the live show. We have One Direction just generally being dreadful singers, how they came third place. Aiden Grimshaw gave a perfect rendition of Mad World. However, he then decided to take it upon himself to act even stranger every single time he performed, to the point where I was like, why is no one checking up on this man? Many battles are lost. Wagner, of course, we've already spoken about him, but his bongo obsession every week got the viewers tuning in. Cher Lloyd's iconic performance on Halloween week of Stay. It may be the most iconic solo performance on the show's history. And Katie Waisel survived the bottom 2 4 times. It took her 5 times in the bottom to get her out the show. One of my favorite times, and she was in the bottom, and she just goes, "You know what? Sod it! Hey, you know what? Sod it! Just please!" All of those things I mentioned were spoken about so much. They were huge water cooler moments. And it didn't end with what was being shown on the show. Press were going crazy too. Wagner's rumors of him and his past life, because he was such a mysterious man. There was rumors of divas behind the scenes, including Katie and Cher, budding romances within the group, a member of Bellamy and One Direction dating. Paparazzis would literally sit outside the studios every single day to get shots of them because the papers wanted them that badly. And of course, we have to speak about the iconic group performances that this season birthed us. And the show finished with the most watched episode in X Factor history. And as I mentioned, the most watched non-sporting show of the 2010s with 17.7 million viewers. And even though viewing figures like nowadays, you will never ever achieve anything like that, that was still something crazy for the time. I read from this article, it's a remarkable achievement for this series not only to have got advertisers fighting for slots in ITV peak time, but to have restored the 15 or 20 simultaneous millions who, according to conventional wisdom, are available only to royal funerals, attacks, and England World Cup matches. So how has Cowell's show rewritten TV history? The most plausible explanation is that drama and comedy, which traditionally has cross-generational audiences, have split into smaller interest formats, often featuring niche material. Yet the desire for a show that everyone can watch, a Morecambe and Wise of today, seems to have survived. The X Factor may not always obey the traditional rules of family viewing, but in general, it has become a rare example of an entertainment which the oldest and youngest members of a family are not embarrassed to watch together. As I just read, the viewing figures for this show, you don't get get that for a normal TV show. This was saved for monumentous occasion, which everybody had to tune in for, which is what the X Factor had become. It had become a cross-generational thing that every single person had to tune into. To your surprise, and you may not know, there was another boy band on this series other than One Direction, and they were called FYD, conveniently eliminated very early. I wonder how the producers manufactured that. Found an interview with band member Ryan Lee Sager. He was basically saying that the show had turned into a pop star machine. By entering the show and getting as far as he did, there was an expectation that you were going to become a pop star. The producers would feed into that. They knew that these people applying were like aware of how big that you could be from this show, and it makes you more hungry for this, which if you're more hungry, you're more likely to do whatever they want you to do and creates better TV. Again, Sophia Wardman from Bellamy sort of gave something in a similar vein. In the same way, if you watch my Love Island video, I talked about one of the reasons Love Island has become less boring is because people going on the show will self-regulate their behavior. People on the X Factor would self-regulate in a way that they were wanting to give the producers what they thought they wanted in order of their chances of going further be better. Sophia Wardman wrote on her blog, you could hear that, oh my god, I'm so excited to be here comments, that I can't believe I got through to boot camp declaration, and I don't know what I'll do if I don't get through to the next round pleads. They were all annoyingly typical, and I probably said all of those exact things. It became the standard narrative in every interview to present yourself as the most humble, appreciative, and enthusiastic contestant that ever existed. Off the back of the most popular season and the most successful season ever, Matt Cardle's follow-up single scored number 6 in the chart. Rebecca Ferguson's debut single scored a number 10. One Direction had 2 number 1s and a number 3 song, and Cher Lloyd came out with her iconic Swagger Jagger. The contestants were successful, the show was successful, but ultimately this season we're about to talk about pretty much ruined the show's legacy. The show had fully cemented itself into British pop culture, and not just in terms of television, but also in terms of music industry success. At this point, the show had also spanned multiple international versions. Obviously, international versions spawn off the back of popular reality TV show formats, but I also think the rise of YouTube really helped push the show globally. It was announced in between the previous season and this season that there was going to be an X Factor USA, which meant that Simon Cowell would be jumping across the pond and leaving the UK version of the show to go judge the US version. And not only that, but he was taking Cheryl with him. This f***ed the show over. Danny also left the show because of maternity reasons, which only left Louis Walsh as the only judge remaining to be left on the show. Simon was such a staple and backbone. And on top of that, as I mentioned, Cheryl really gave the show a new set of legs. And not only did Cheryl help the show helped Cheryl so much as well. It excelled her into her own success story as a pop artist. Really, Cheryl probably wouldn't have been as famous as she was if it wasn't for X Factor. So the two kind of came hand in hand. And with those two and Danny gone, you're looking at a free replacement panel, with Louis Walsh being the only remaining 4th member. We've had panel switch-ups before, but it's only ever been one judge going or one judge being added on. Multiple pop icons were asked to do this job, and in my research, I found out that they asked Rihanna and Katy Perry, literal 2 biggest female artists who were dominating the late 2000s and early 2010s. You think they're going to take their time out of their pop schedule to come and judge Ablisa? No, of course not. And instead, we got Talusa from N-Dubs. We also, of course, needed a replacement for Simon Cowell. We needed a baddie person. We needed someone who could give the harsh criticism to make everybody go boo and disagree with. And that came in the form of Gary Barlow. And pop icon Kelly Rowland. Kelly was having her own little renaissance. That's not the right word. In the UK, thanks to her like dance hits. Kelly's solo career was actually far more successful in the UK than it was in the US, so it makes sense why she ended up coming over to the show. To be honest, Kelly is probably my favorite judge that this show has ever had. It's a shame that we only got her for 1 season. So with that, a brand new judging panel had come, and it very much gave this show a different feeling. It felt like a modern era, which we didn't know at this point if that was a good or bad thing. Auditions began with a still strong viewership of 11 million viewers. Obviously, it was down from the 17 million from the final, but in terms of other episodes of the previous season, it was pretty level. And even though that this judging panel was brand new, it was still them slotting into the same stereotypes. As I mentioned, Gary was the meanie. You had Talisa, who was the Cheryl, the younger judge, who sort of gave it a breath of youthfulness. You had Kelly, who was giving Danny, and then you still had Louis being Louis. It seemed like the producers were almost taking this all a step too far. The antics were crazy. You had people jumping in the pool at judges' houses. When we got to boot camp, there was this whole segment where all the contestants had to stay out and drink and party to sort of decipher who would take this responsibility and who was just there to party. It felt very like Towie reality TV-esque. I don't know if this is just hindsight and being able to look back and seeing the car crash it's about to become, that the show was sort of getting ahead of itself. It knew that the anticness and the drama brought in more viewers than the actual singing itself, and it started to focus on the wrong stuff. stuff. But all that was nothing compared to what was about to happen in the live show. There are 3 contestants in particular who I would like to speak about to sort of demonstrate X Factor's producers' manipulation, taking it too far. Now, I know I've already spoken about like the way that the producers would manipulate storylines, always been wrong and uncomfortable to watch. But this season in particular, it felt extremely uncomfortable. I'm gonna start with Janet Devlin. From day one, Janet Devlin was clearly the producer's A plan for the winner this year. I think she sort of fit that almost like a mix between Ellie Goulding and that singer-songwriter Florence and the Machine type, which was very popular in 2011. She was featured in the first audition show, which as we know is very good steading going into the rest of the competition. She was given a massive time segment in that first episode and continued to be the focal point of the competition in the boot camp state. And going into the live shows, it still looked like Janet was the plan A for the winner of the season. She was given the pimp slot at the end of the very first live show episode, which as we all know is the most coveted spot of the show. Janet's storyline was that she was a 16-year-old from Ireland. It was in the middle of nowhere around a bunch of sheep living on a farm, and she never really got out of it, and she'd never been to perform on a big stage, never possibly imagined herself there. She came out in this big jumper, really shy, and she was a little bit fronty, this feeling inside. She was good, but what really sold it was the story behind her rather than her voice herself. The public was eating up that there was this shy girl. Possibly think she would have a voice like a songbird in her, but she did. And this sort of shyness and stage fright was constantly referenced to in VTs and reinforced to the public to make sure that they got this, and this was the start of her journey.
A few things here that that are tricky for me. Having everyone look at you, it makes you feel really self-conscious. Like, this is a completely different world from what I'm used to.
However, what was actually going on behind the scenes was Janet knew who she wanted to be as an artist, which I have to applaud. At the age of 16, it takes a lot of guts to sort of stick to what you want to do and what you know, especially with a corporation as big as X Factor and Psycho behind you, telling you what to do, and these people having the fate of your future in their hands, and you still want to stick what you want to do. At 16 years old, I would have crumbled and cried and said, put me out there in the Cup song from Pitch Perfect and I'll do what you want me to do. I listened to a podcast that Janet was on. It was actually a podcast with Fleur East, who was also a contestant on the X Factor. And Janet said around the weeks 2 to 3, there started to be a shift behind stage and the way that producers were treating her. They kind of clocked on that Janet couldn't be molded into what they wanted. And Janet said that she would often refuse outfits to wear on stage or say that she wouldn't sing this particular song choice this week. While this was happening backstage, conveniently, stories started running in the press that Janet was being a diva. It had even creeped through into her VTs on the show. On 2 separate occasions, the stylist of the show was seen describing her as tricky and hard to work with.
Styling Janet is always quite tricky.
The producers thought that she was going to be naive, do what they say, and they quickly discovered she had a strong will, and they had made her extremely popular with the public. She was topping the votes for the first 4 weeks, and it was looking like producers had a serious task on their hand if they wanted to get Janet out of here. Her VTs, while also was having her stylist complaining about her, was constantly referring to how she didn't have the full X Factor package. There was loads of self-deprecating, like she was saying she was boring, she was saying she has a weird music taste. There was even she was saying she doesn't like Christmas. And for a family show, that's maybe some of the worst subliminal messaging that you could give. The judges continued to refer to her as one-dimensional, as boring, and it was working. First time on week 6 didn't top the vote, and more stories were coming out of her in the press saying that Kelly Rowland was having a hard time working with her because of her strop. One article reads, backstage sources says 16-year-old Janet, originally considered the shyest contestant, has become impossible to work with, refusing to wear outfits picked for her and arguing about song choices. And the final week for Janet, she sang a song called Mbop. Janet forgot her words in this song, where in the podcast, which I mentioned earlier with Fleur East, she revealed that it wasn't actually because she forgot her words. She messed up because she thought she was going to throw up on stage. I remember not having eaten properly for ages, and then I had these Japanese noodles they used to make in the studio and eating the whole tub. I hadn't been able to eat the whole tub ever, and I absolutely shouldn't have, because then I went into this complete state of I'm going to be sick. She revealed in the podcast that she was actually going to walk away from the show if she got through this week. I don't know if it's because I put the most research into this, but this is one of the most extreme cases of character assassinations that I've seen. And you can see in Janet's face week by week how exhausted she became from this competition. Need I remind you that she had just turned 17 while all this was happening, meaning she was literally a child, while the producers were character assassinating her in the press and on national TV to tens of millions of people weekly. Janet wasn't the only case of this, however, and in probably the worst case ever was contestant Misha B. Misha was a 19-year-old rapper and singer from Manchester. Still to this day has some of my favorite performances ever on X Factor. She brought something so unique to the competition. I had never seen such a polished act come on the show. Her week 1 performance of Adele rolling in the deep with an original rap was groundbreaking. And it was pretty obvious from the jump that she was going to be a threat to a lot of the girls in the competition. And on week 3 of the competition, Misha got accused of bullying other contestants live on TV by Louis Walsh and Talisa.
Told by a few contestants this week that there's been a few mean comments towards them.
One of my contestants has complained to me about Misha bullying her backstage. She told me.
We have had multiple accusations of divaship, whether that's in the press or on stage. But the word bully is a far deeper and harsher word than diva or anything like that. Diva comes with the territory of being a pop star. Diva almost plays into it. But calling someone a bully has no connotations to the music industry. And especially a young black female who was confident in her performance, knew how the British public was going to take to that, and it was despicable that they were taking down a 19-year-old like that on TV. This word equated to malice and intimidation. It wasn't difficult to work with because she knew what she wanted to do, like Janet. And it was probably a combination of wanting to take Misha down and get some press coverage about the dramas and fights backstage and cause some speculation. That should never land on a 19-year-old's shoulders to carry. Gary Barlow wrote in his autobiography, about half an hour before the show goes live, the producers would come in and they'd go, "Oh my God, that Misha, she's a bully. Can't believe it. She is such a bully. In fact, you know what? You should say it. You should say it on air. She's bullied everyone all week." And it didn't stop there. Articles started running with the headline Misha Bully instead of Misha B, something that she was never really able to properly shake for the whole season. Misha very bravely in 2020 came forward and shed some light on the situation, explained how she was left traumatized and suicidal after this experience. These judges spent a maximum of 1% time with me and their contestants, apart from Gary and Kelly. So my understanding is you've created this whole narrative of me being overconfident because I'm black. In your eyes, black girls should not be confident. Black girls are just one of. You look like a young Tina Turner. You're like a young Shaka Khan. Why can't I not just look like me? Why is it always you looking like someone else? Why is it always a comparison for black women? Moving on to Talisa, if you go back and watch the clip carefully, and I've gone back and watched this clip carefully, this woman has every line scripted before she even opened her mouth. I wasn't fooled. I know what it is here. I know exactly what it is here. And you see, back in 2011, they got away with it. Now, I know that I am not the only one here that has heard these words. Feisty, mean. These are like the common words that people use to describe black women. She then went on to say something along the lines of seeing that some of the things that I say could come across as mean. Let me get one thing clear. This woman had spent 0 time with me. The only conversation this woman had with me was after all this happened, when she gave me a very half-assed apology. Not the words, "I'm sorry, but I never meant to do you no harm." I remember thinking of ways I could just end the pain. We arrived back at the mansion and all I could think about was running away, just getting out of there, because to me, people stood by and didn't say anything when they knew it was wrong and they knew it was lies. She later goes on to explain how she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after the experience. It changed me. I didn't trust anyone. Everyone asks me, "Misha, where have you been? What's been going on?" I've been battling. I've been healing. I started therapy in 2012. I'm still having therapy now. I think it's disgusting and lacks a complete duty of care to weaponize this against a 19-year-old girl in an attempt to get more ratings or more money. And it's not just Misha who has been vocal about the discrimination against black women from people associated with the show. And Fleur East was told that her afro wasn't relatable and she would have to have straight hair for the live shows, which she refused. I can't even begin to comment on how disgusting this is, that producers and people in the industry could even have the nerve to say this to these girls. And although a lot of the behavior that we've discussed already is inexcusable and disgusting, I think this is by far the thing that enrages me the most out of all the claims from this show. It's disgusting that any human can sit in a room and have no moral compass or no soul to not put a stop to this. Contestant Frankie Kokoza from this season also landed the show in a lot of hot water. We're playing a dangerous game with Frankie, as he was enlisted on the show to be the teenage heartthrob contestant, but also in a way that it was like a bad boy. In his first audition on the very first show, he came out and he revealed that he got a name of every girl he slept with tattooed on his bum, and they even incited Holly from Geordie Shore into kissing him to get paparazzi shot. But in weeks 5 and 6, it all came back to bite X Factor in the arse, because Frankie would be ejected for breaking one of the X Factor golden rules. Later came out that he was allegedly removed after boasting backstage about a cocaine-fueled sex session. However, the case with Frankie is the producers were encouraging this behavior. They were making sure that Frankie was behaving wild and going out drinking every week in order to get tabloid attention. Frankie said, "They'd tell me I had a VIP at a club and would book me a car to take me to the door. Then when I arrived, there was paparazzis everywhere. During what will now stand as Frankie's final appearance last weekend, presenter Dermot O'Leary revealed with mock parental sternness that the non-singer was appearing after having managed only half an hour's sleep. Even at the time, viewers didn't need a pharmacology degree to guess that he may not have achieved this feat on Protein Shake. The producers are officially disappointed, but viewers may suppose that the 18-year-old behaved exactly according to form. Frankie being ejected also sent the show into a turmoil because they had just had a double elimination, so now 3 acts had gone in 1 week. So they decided that one of the 4 acts who was eliminated on week 1 would now be coming back over halfway the competition. I get that it's the most logistical sense because they were the only eliminated contestants who weren't eliminated due to viewers' money. If they just brought back the previous person from last week, everybody would be like, well, what was the point of voting for my favorite last week? But it just creates a complete mockery of this show that someone who hadn't been in half the competition was now in the final 7. The contestant who ended up coming back was Amelia Lilly, who was the same age as Janet, but a lot more confident, and I'm pretty sure was the producer's answer into taking Janet out when it was looking like nothing could get rid of her. They are 2 contrasting 16-year-old girls, and Janet has already been being branded as boring and repetitive over the past few weeks, so the fact that they're now able to bring Amelia in and describe her as a new breath of fresh air, and not only that, but Amelia Lilly was very talented and providing top-tier performances. The show was completely spiraling at this point, and these were the main 3 storylines, but they weren't the only ones. Contestant Johnny Robinson was being accused of benefit fraud, and Kitty Brocknell had literally different claims against her every week in the newspaper. The whole credibility of this show was completely out the window, and especially adding to the fact that it was a new era with new judges made it look like, oh my god, this show is what I know it as. There was wild cards bringing people back. There was 4 people going in 1 week. There was someone coming into the competition halfway through. And there was also a contestant called Ashford, who was a member of a boy band who got eliminated. But he was then brought back a few weeks later to join a boy band who was still in the competition. Drug scandals. There was bullying scandals. This whole season had this really dark cloud. Simon Cowell actually admitted to the papers that he made a mistake. He said that he became too cocky in 2011. And he got a big wake-up call when the series ratings dropped. It was the first time in years that the rival Saturday night show Strictly Come Dancing beat X Factor in the rating. And this mess of a season reflected in the following season, which was 3 million viewers down. It did give us the iconic moment of fag ash breath.
I don't know what's offended me more, what you've said or the fag ash breath.
Nicole snatching the microphone in the final, and of course it gave us the birth of British royalty Rylan. The show was no longer the show that it once was. It was no longer what the show originally was, which was a humble talent show watching the everyday public who had a talent and the public being able to decide who was going to be famous. It wasn't what the show was at its peak, which was a sleek, well-oiled pop-making machine. It was now a tired, flat reality TV show. The focus wasn't on your One Direction, Alexandra Burks and your JLSs. I found this article from 2012 which reads, "Make no mistake, the show is in a muddle. Ratings are down. Strictly Come Dancing is beating it week after week. Worse still, the X Factor isn't fighting back. The whole thing looks flaccid and tired and ready to throw in the towel." It got so bad that during the audition stages, there was reports that Simon was going to fly back and cancel his stint on the USA just so he could watch over the editing of these audition episodes. It did make me think, had it not been for the US version, would X Factor have had such a sudden crashing death? Obviously, Simon and Cheryl weren't there and they revamped the judging panel, but also do kind of think, as horrible as Simon is, I think he knows how to do these rating ploys well, as was shown all previous seasons, and I probably think he was spending so much time focusing on the US version and making sure that's a success that the people left behind to sort of manage the previous season of the X Factor made it a complete car crash. And even though that Simon had always been manipulating the show to make sure that people were thinking what he wanted them to think, but Simon was, his manipulation worked. Even though we were forced Cher and One Direction down our throats, we as a public then accepted them as a pop act and ate them up. The people that they're pushing are actually extremely talented, and you compared them to the people who were on this season. You had Jermaine Douglas, who was a fantastic singer, but in terms of performance standard, he wasn't giving Ollie Murs. You had Christopher Maloney, who was the public's favorite. You were seeing people like Misha B, JLS, One Direction dominating the UK chart. But at the same time, the same show that birthed them was airing people like Rylan doing Gangnam Style and Christopher Maloney. The juxtaposition of those 2 timelines happening simultaneously gave the death of the X Factor even more oomph to it, because you were literally directly comparing the 2, and And one journalist actually accredited Christopher Maloney to the entire responsibility of the downfall of the show, saying he basically killed the X Factor stone cold dead. Serving as both a novelty act and a grand pleaser, he dominated the public vote every night. Sorry, I've been speaking for 4 hours at this point, and I feel like I wasn't getting my point across properly because my mind had gone crazy. But what I was trying to say was the stark contrast between the same show that produced really cool and successful acts, currently airing cabaret and novelty act, while those previous contestants were still having chart success. It was jarring to watch as a viewer because it was ruining the legacy the show had in your head, because you could see that the caliber wasn't the same. And again, I think it's because Simon wasn't in the UK, because as much as Simon is an evil man, he does have a very good talent when it comes to artists and music, and he was very on the pulse with cool, edgy acts who, as we saw, were successful in the chart. And also, when I said that Simon does manipulation well, that was not me applauding his manipulation. I was saying that in all seasons where he was present, to the viewer, the manipulation wasn't as obvious, and it's no chance that the first season he disappeared. It is very dark and horrible to watch as a viewer. It's also no difference that the second season he's disappeared from. The quality of the music and acts goes to shit. Okay, carry on. It was a show for your granny at this point. The entire sort of younger demographic had completely lost interest, and in the later seasons, they did try and sex it up a bit. They did try and make it those who could seriously give the current pop girlies a run for their money. You know, you had contestants like Tamira Johnson, Fleur East, and Louisa Johnson, who not only had vocals on them, but they had a specific image. They had a sort of creative direction that you could buy into. Even though that they could be genuine threats to the industry, they never even stood a chance of being able to get their foot in the door. The public interest had already gone at this point. If they partook in an earlier season, their career paths would most likely be extremely different. But they were just too late to the show, and the only people that were left watching were the people who liked the contestants like Christopher Maloney and Sam Bailey. They were the older generation who was left watching it as the younger generation moved over to things like social media and viewing the show as a show that older people watch. The market that actually made those really successful acts in the late 2000s and early 2010s successes were not at X Factor's hand anymore. And the following year, in 2013, acts like Tamira, Rough Copy, and Hannah Barrett really could have had an impact on the music industry, and they were the type of acts who, though the public may not typically vote for, with a little producer tugging here and there, they could at least probably get 2 or 3 of them all the way to the final in a psycho deal. But they were all cut before the final. Acts like Sam Bailey and Nicholas McDonald, who none of them ever stood a chance of having a successful music career, albeit they're great singers, but not every great singer is going to have a great music career. The producers tried many times to save the show and take it back to its roots. Every year before an X Factor season was coming out, we were being told that we were going back to basic. We were being told that the old X Factor was coming back. They brought back room auditions in order to try and tap back into their roots, but it just kind of, anything made the show feel even more damp. It almost felt like there was a budget cut, that they couldn't maybe fill out an arena anymore, so they had to go back to the room. They tried new features like the 6-chair challenge, and it became a complete farce. If you have ever watched an episode of a 6-chair challenge, it's like a game of musical chairs. Acts would be told to go and then to be brought right back 2 songs later, and then brought back again, and then sent home. Like, it was a mess. They brought back Simon, they brought back Cheryl, they even tried to bring back Sharon for a season, but the public interest and the stain that, in particular, the 2011 and 2012, the treatment of people like Misha and Janet, and the dreariness of acts like Christopher Maloney had left such a stain on the show that no Back to Basics was ever going to bring it back. To the younger demographic, the X Factor was dead in their eyes. And at this point, plenty of acts had come forward and explained things such as that, the fact that there's multiple auditions before you get through. And the public in general were a lot more clued up in terms of what the fuck was going on behind the scenes. The show had no creative direction and no consistency. In 2014, they tried to go back to basics by bringing back Simon and Cheryl and bringing back room auditions and saying that it was like an old show. And when that didn't work, they went the complete opposite direction and brought in Nick Grimshaw and Rita Ora, who were young and cool in the producer's eyes. I'm getting whiplash trying to keep up with season per season. Fleur East was the last sort of almost attempt at a pop career. I know Fleur has a very successful career presenting now, but she was a great performer. Her version of Uptown Funk was not only one of the best performances on X Factor history, but it actually made Mark Ronson release the song early because she did it so well, and I think it was unreleased at the time. And she had success with her song Sax, but unfortunately the public appetite for her was just not there, and I probably think it was just because not enough people watched her on the show to buy into her career. Louisa Johnson would be the first winner since Joe McElderry to miss out on the Christmas #1 spot. That season alone was a whole mess, and I know I'm sort of speed running through these last few seasons, but that is mainly because they all sort of clump into one, and the viewers were dwindling by million drops every season. If I was to sit here and explain every season, it would genuinely be boring because the public interest wasn't there. There was no huge speculation going on behind the scenes because no one gave a shit. And I think Louisa missing the #1 was the final nail in the coffin that the show was no longer relevant if you couldn't even get the Christmas #1. Giving an artist a recording contract for £1 million, and it's all set up that the winning part of the show is that you're gonna have a huge career in pop, and then you don't even get the #1 single when you drop the song. It's already setting your career off to a bad start. And there was some final last minute attempts at saving the show. We had a band version and a celebrity version in 2019, but the audience was not there at this point. There was no sort of twist season or spin-off show that could possibly bring back bad public image that the show had created for itself. It was also enough to turn off any potential really talented singers to go on the show, because a lot of the time these people weren't going on the show because they wanted to go on X Factor. They were going on the show because they knew it was a springboard into their career and an easy jump step. A bit like people going on Love Island because they want to be an influencer. You're skipping out all the hard work and going straight there. But if the followers aren't there for Love Island anymore, then why are you going to go on the show? The same way that people who are talented and really want to become singers are no longer going to go on X Factor and audition because they don't want that as their public image. And finally, contestants were speaking out about the wrongdoings of the show. Stars of the show like Jedward, Rebecca Ferguson, Katie Waysore, and Cher Lloyd have all come out and spoken out about some of the disgusting things which went on behind the scenes with them. And with the rise of social media and giving people the power to actually use their own voice and get their story out, it was becoming very clear to the public that this show was not squeaky clean. And I feel like in previous times, it wasn't a choice for these artists to step out because they were terrified of NDA contracts. Stories to come out from an X Factor contestant was actually someone who didn't even get past their audition. It was from an act called Zoe Alexander. She was a Pink tribute act who was asked to audition for the show, and she was asked to submit 5 song choices. While she was a Pink tribute act, she didn't want to do that anymore, and she wanted to be her own singer. So the 5 song choices she submitted were not Pink songs. The producers went back and told her that she'd be better off picking a Pink song, and it was probably the best route for her to go down. She obliged because obviously if the producers are telling you this is your best chance to be successful on the show, you're gonna believe them and do what they say. She turned up to our audition day and she actually revealed that she was without food or drink for hours. Make you more anxious, which will result especially in an act like Zoe, which their plan was to humiliate her, in better TV. And she said while she was being interviewed for her pre-audition, they would basically make every question that she was asked about Pink, and if she tried to divert the conversation to something else, for example, Zoe tried to explain how she was badly bullied in school, the producers then asked, do you think Pink was bullied in school? Zoe went on and did her audition, and they started accusing her of trying to copy Pink's look. They actually said, which was really interesting, that the producers edited it to make the audience look like they were disappointed, but she claims the audience really liked her, cheering and clapping, but they just put clips of a disappointed audience over her. This isn't the first claim of this. Jade Richards from the 2011 series came out and sang Adele, Someone Like You, and it was one of the most viral auditions from the series. And Kelly Rowland was crying and she was saying, I had a dream about this song, like I can't believe you're singing this song. And Jade actually revealed that that comment was about another song. It originally came out and sang an Etta James song, which was the song that Kelly was crying to and saying, I had a dream about this. And after they had got that, the producers then came on and was like, actually, Jade, would you want to sing another song? Second song, just in case, as a backup. So she sang Adele, Someone Like You. And then they only then aired her singing Adele, Someone Like You. They still showed Kelly saying that she was crying. Because a lot of people were like, why were you having a dream about Someone Like You by Adele, girl? This song has been on Radio 1 non-stop for the past 3 months. Anyway, back to Zoe Alexander. Enraged Zoe because at this point she was twigging what was going on and that she was being taken as a fool. She fell down the stairs because she started having a panic attack. When she was saying this, the producers then edited it over with an X over her mouth and blur so it looked like she was screaming and swearing and being angry, but actually she was having a panic attack. And this is not the only case. I cannot imagine how many people they have convinced are the next best thing and they're gonna go all the way to the final, only to then finally get to the stage after all these preliminary auditions and be made a laughingstock and a fool. I think when it got towards the end of it, it was very obvious that the audience weren't dumb anymore. See the exploitation and the manipulation.
You know what, Sonny? Just please don't give up on me.
Do I think there is a chance for an X Factor return in this day and age? I don't think so. Simon Cowell did try and bring back another talent show in 2021 called Walk the Line. It was hosted by Maya Jama, but this was a flop. It was cancelled after one season. And I think that X Factor's success relied so heavily on audience being gullible and able to feed into people just believing whatever they were showing. I don't think that you could watch someone like Alexandra Burke wowing the judges for the first time in a conference room to being on stage with Beyonce singing a duet in 3 months and it be as remarkable in this day and age without people being skeptical about it. After so many claims of X Factor ruining people's lives, even seeing the effects that Jessie Nelson, who's a member of Little Mix, had on her BBC documentary when she explained some of the horrific and vile treatment she had while on the show due to fat shaming, it really puts dark umbrella on the show as a whole. I just don't think there is scope X Factor itself to ever really make a comeback without the humongous negative connotations that come with it, all down to the alleged lack of duty of care from producers and the show's tarnished reputation in the last few years. With the rise of social media as well, most undiscovered artists don't need to go and embarrass themselves by singing in sparkly outfits and being on a vote off against singers like Honey G in order to gain stardom. They have means through TikTok to release their own music and it's a far more likely chance that they're going to get a #1 hit through that way. As I mentioned, Simon Cowell tried to redo a talent show with Walk on the Line. Little Mix also created a talent show called Little Mix The Search. It was a recent show on the BBC called Project Idol, but none of these reboots have failed to A, score a second season, or B, produce any tangible success. I know The Voice is still on ITV, which is another singing competition, but could you name me one singer from The Voice? I was going to say in the past 5 years, but really ever, other than Becky Hill. X Factor was an anomaly and a product of its time, and I really think that it was a show that could only work in the 2000s. A show like X Factor to work and give the control completely up to the public, it needed to be in a time where freedom of speech was a lot harder to get your point across when you had people with a far higher social authority and power who were able to silence you. The reality TV genre as a whole has changed its ways so much, even in the past 5 years when it comes down to the mental well-being of contestants. And I just don't know if a talent show really fits into that category in this day and age. I don't know if there's much space for an X Factor reboot. Maybe in years to come, the public's sort of nostalgia for it will grow and the bad memories associated with the show will fade. But as of right now, despite the iconic moments in British pop culture which will be cemented in history that it's provided us, I think the best bet is to leave it live. Thank you so much for watching this video. I was so excited to make this one because X Factor was always my favorite show growing up, so getting to study it for the past month, it's been so fun. I really again want to emphasize the thank that I have for you showing the support on the previous long form video. These videos take a lot of effort and a lot of time compared to what I'm used to, but I enjoy doing it, so as long as you guys out there watching it, again, thank you for watching, and I still just want to double clarify that everything I said was alleged, and I will see you guys very soon for a brand new video. Bye!